From Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Saamiyah Syed. Our top story tonight: Muslims around the world celebrated Al-Adha, or the Feast of Sacrifice, marking the end of the annual Hajj pilgrimage. Al-Adha is one of the most important holidays in the Islamic calendars. It is celebrated to commemorate the Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him's willingness to sacrifice his son Ismail, peace be upon him, as an act of obedience to God. Muslims believe God stayed his hand, spared the boy's life, and placed a ram in his stead. On this day, wealthy Muslims sacrifice an animal and distribute the meat to neighbors, family members, and the needy. In Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, Taliban soldiers took security measures as Muslims gathered for Eid al-Adha prayers at a mosque. On the other side of the world, in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires, Muslims gathered to celebrate and pray. Argentina is home to the largest Muslim community in South America. In Mexico City, Muslims also gathered to perform Eid prayers. In the Central African country of Cameroon, Muslims came in new clothes and greeted one another. An aerial view shows a large number of Muslims performing Eid prayer in the capital city of Yaoundé. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, large number of Muslims gathered in Goma, the capital of the eastern province of North Kivu. More than 1 million people have fled fighting between rebels and government forces in that province. Hundreds are living in makeshift tents covered with carpets or plastic sheets to keep out the rain. In the northwest African country of Mauritania, Muslims gathered in the capital Nouakchott to celebrate Eid and offer prayers. Thousands of Muslims gathered early Wednesday for Eid al-Adha prayers at the Peel Stadium in Rwanda's capital, Kigali. Muslims performed Eid prayers at the Massakalilo Janani Mosque, the largest in West Africa, in Dakar, Senegal. And in the Indonesian capital of Jakarta, most Muslims gathered at the Istiqlal Mosque to perform their prayers. In Japan, the Eid festival was celebrated with the same fervor. Japan's Muslim community, the Nihon no Muslim Shakai, gathered at the Tokyo Mosque for prayers. In Golistan, Iran, footage shows worshippers gathering on the first day of Eid al-Adha. In occupied Jerusalem, Palestinians gathered at Al-Aqsa Mosque and performed prayers. And in London, Muslims gathered in Highbury Park to greet one another and offer prayers. Footage from Sunnah TV shows Muslims praying in the city of Medina in Saudi Arabia. Muslims also gathered for Eid prayers at the Bangsamoro Government Center in Cotabato City, Bangsamoro, Philippines. The Muslim-majority autonomous region is located in the southwestern part of Mindanao Island. In war-torn Ukraine, Muslims gathered in the city of Louisville to perform Eid prayers. Muslims also gathered across the United States to offer prayers and greet each other. The Minneapolis City Council has voted down a proposal to implement rent control. 3 Muslim council members who were in favor of rent control were absent from the meeting to observe Eid al-Adha. They have released a joint statement criticizing the vote, saying it was inappropriate, purposeful, and exclusionary. They said the council had failed to plan ahead for Eid al-Adha, a major Islamic holiday. The council had been debating the issue for more than 2 years. Wednesday's vote effectively killed the proposal for the remainder of the year. Connecticut State Representative Mariam Khan was physically assaulted during the celebration of Eid al-Adha. The incident has raised concerns about anti-Muslim prejudice. According to the Council on American Islamic Relations, Khan was walking with her family when a man approached her and made inappropriate remarks. The situation then escalated when the man physically attacked Khan, hitting and knocking her to the ground. Another person intervened and chased the attacker until police arrived. The suspect was identified as 30-year-old Andre Desmond. He now faces several charges, including false imprisonment, assault, trespassing, and obstructing police. Governor Ned Lamont expressed his support for Khan in a tweet. CARE has emphasized the need for a full investigation and prosecution of the perpetrator. Growing anti-Muslim incidents across the U.S. include vandalism at mosques, harassment of Muslim women, and bullying of Muslim students. In a unanimous decision, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the right of employees to perform religious rituals in the workplace. Experts say the court's decision is a victory for religious freedom. They say it will help ensure workers are not discriminated against because of their faith. The verdict requires employers to accommodate employees' religious practices unless doing so results in significant additional costs. The court reversed a lower court's decision that allowed the U.S. Postal Service to deny a letter carrier a religious permit. Gerald Groff wanted to observe the Sabbath on Sundays. He says he was forced to choose between his faith and his job. The Supreme Court's ruling was written by Justice Samuel Alito Jr. The Supreme Court has banned the decades-old practice of affirmative action in college admissions in which race played a role in student selection. The ruling overturns admission policies at Harvard and the College of North Carolina. It now sets a precedent for higher education institutions across the U.S., which must find new ways to promote student diversity. President Joe Biden, who led the opposition to the Supreme Court's decision, says he disagrees with the ruling, noting that many people mistakenly believe affirmative action allows unqualified students to be admitted over qualified students. He explained that while there is talent, creativity, and hard work everywhere, equal opportunity is not as accessible. Biden says students from the top 1% of family incomes in America are 77 times more likely to attend an elite college than 20% of poorer families. Experts say the affirmative action program is critical to ensuring Black and Brown students have an equal place in higher education. Of lawmakers and advocates are calling the ruling a step backward for racial justice. They also renewed calls to expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices. They argued the current court is too conservative and out of touch with the needs of the American people. More on how Yusuf Salam won the Democratic primary in New York City comes with details after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back. Yusuf Salam has won the Democratic primary for a New York City Council seat. The 49-year-old poet, activist, and inspirational speaker is vying to represent Harlem and Upper Manhattan. In a tightly contested race, Salam holds an overwhelming lead over his closest competitor, Assemblywoman Inez Dickens. In his victory speech, he emphasized his campaign was about those who had been laid off and forgotten. He also promised to restore a voice to Harlem, which had been marginalized. Salam is one of the Central Park Five. These were 5 teenagers wrongfully convicted of the brutal 1989 rape of a woman who had been jogging in Central Park. Salam and 4 others were arrested, beaten, and coerced into a false confession of the rape. They spent years in prison for a crime they did not commit. Salam says he was the victim of a flawed system at age 15, but now he wants to turn his pain into action and make a difference. The Louisville City Council in Kentucky has announced an optional small business loan program that is compliant with Islamic law. The program allows borrowers to pay a service fee equal to the interest amount over the life of their loan. The change was made in response to the needs of Muslim residents who follow Islamic law, which prohibits charging or paying interest. Farhan Abdi is executive director of Louisville's Somali community. He says many Muslim small businesses have had difficulty obtaining loans because of that rule. Amos Izermana, director of Louisville's Office of Immigrant Affairs, says the change is relatively easy to set up and expands access for Muslim residents. The amendment is currently available for 3 programs and will be available to all, not just Muslim recipients. City officials consulted with Islamic law experts and community members to ensure the change is fully Sharia compliant. Some Louisville nonprofits, including Jewish Family and Career Services, offer Sharia-compliant microloans. The U.S. and Muslim countries are condemning the burning of the Quran on the day of Al-Adha in Sweden. Iraqi national Salwan Momika burned a copy of the holy book on the Islamic holiday. The incident occurred outside a mosque in Sweden's capital, Stockholm. Momika first threw the Quran onto the ground before burning it and insulting Islam. Many Islamic countries have also condemned the incident, summoning Swedish ambassadors and diplomats in their countries to protest. The Arab League called the incident an attack on the core of Islamic faith. And the 57-member Organization of Islamic Cooperation also condemned it. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called the attack the arrogance of the West. The incident could lead Erdogan to rule out Sweden's entry into NATO at the upcoming summit in Vilnius. On June 12th, a Swedish appeals court upheld a lower court's decision to overturn a ban on Quran burning. It ruled police had no legal basis to prevent 2 Quran burning protests earlier this year. The White House has condemned the harassment of a Wall Street Journal reporter. This was after she questioned Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi about human rights in India during his visit to the U.S. last week. NBC correspondent Kelly O'Donnell asked about the online harassment of Sabrina Siddiqui by some Indian politicians with Modi's government. White House spokesman John Kirby says this was unacceptable and contrary to many principles of democracy. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre also says the Biden administration is committed to press freedom. Siddiqui is a longtime White House correspondent covering the Biden administration. During a state visit at the White House last week, Siddiqui had asked Modi what steps he had taken to improve the rights of Muslims and other minorities and uphold the freedom of expression in India. Modi says he was really surprised by the question and defended India, saying democracy is in our DNA. Modi added there is absolutely no place for discrimination. Modi and his Bharatiya Janata Party have been criticized for pushing India towards Hindu nationalism. Under the BJP's rule, anti-Muslim sentiment has increased in India, including communal riots in northeast Delhi in 2020. In February, Indian journalist Siddique Kappan, a Muslim, was released from prison on bail after being held 2 years without trial. Human rights groups claim his arrest was politically motivated. Reporters Without Borders notes India has slipped to 161st place out of 180 countries in its 2023 World Press Freedom Index. Iran has filed a case against Canada at the International Court of Justice. It alleges that Canada violated its state immunity by allowing victims of alleged terror attacks to claim damages from Iran in Canadian civil courts. It says Canada's actions, including listing Iran as a sponsor of terrorism, go against international obligations and have adversely affected its interests. Iran is seeking compensation from Canada. In 2022, a Canadian court ruling awarded more than $80 million in compensation to families of the victims of a Ukrainian airliner downed by Iran in 2020. The flight was carrying over 170 people, including 85 Canadian citizens and permanent residents. It was shot down shortly after takeoff from Tehran. A 2016 Canadian court judgment ordered the transfer of Iran's non-diplomatic land and bank accounts to victims of the attacks by Hamas and Hezbollah. Canada severed diplomatic ties with Iran in 2012 due to Iran's support for Syria's government, its nuclear program, and threats against Israel. Protests continue in France for a teenager murdered by French police. Tensions escalated in the Paris suburb of Nanterre during a solemn march led by the mother of the teen, Nahel M. The boy's mother led the rally on a truck with scores of people following her. Paris police say more than 6,000 people took part in the protest. Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin announced the deployment of 40,000 police officers across the country in anticipation of further demonstrations. Arrests in connection with Nahel's murder have now reached 400. Before we end today's news, I would like to make a special request. It takes more than 55 hours of work per day to produce this news segment for you. It is news with a unique perspective, and you can find it only on here, on Muslim Network TV. Sound Vision is a not-for-profit organization which produces it. And just like PBS and NPR, we depend on your donations. Please visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now or click the link below to donate. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.